Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Chris Cebollero.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, here it is once again for the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Chris Cebollero, and I want to thank you once again for joining me and, of course, allowing me to join you on your professional development journey. It's an honor for me. And anytime we have the opportunity to talk about leadership, it's always a great day, regardless of how much snow is on the ground or how much sun is in the air. I got to tell you, everybody out there in Ireland, you are making this show a really great resource. We are still hovering around the top 10, and that's making me really happy. I'm going to give you this promise. You make this show number one in Ireland, and I will come out there and I will do free leadership talks in Dublin. And if you have any venues out there that you want to start considering to book, get in touch with me and let's make this work, because I know that you folks out there in Ireland will make this a number one leadership show. With that said, I got to tell you, I mean, one of the great things about being a podcast host is the people that you meet, is the people that you interact with. It's the people that you come in contact with. One of the things that I do as a regular basis is I want to listen to leadership podcasts. I know what I have, but I want to hear what other people have. I want to be inspired. I want to be motivated. And that's why you're here. But where do I go? Well, I go out and find some of the great leadership podcasts that are out there. And I got to tell you, I came across one that really kind of gave me the, I had the chill bumps. I got to tell you, it gave me the chill bumps. And he is the host of the Look and Sound of Leadership podcast. He's a speaker. He's a coach. He's the president of Essential Communications, Tom Henschel. Tom, I want to thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you very much.
And kudos to you. I mean, what a great show you have. And, you know, we're going to talk about, I mean, your area is coaching. We're going to talk about coaching, but maybe give the listeners a little bit about your show and get some of them over there to listen to it. You got to pay attention to Tom's show, everyone.
So my show's pretty different. It's just me. I don't do interviews. I tell a story that is like you, the listener, are listening in on a coaching conversation of mine. So it's a lot of dialogue. I said this and she said this, and I tell a story for about 10 minutes, and then I kind of tell you what the takeaways are and coach you a little bit, and we're done. It's about 20 minutes, and I've been doing it since 2008, Chris.
That's
I've
right.
been doing it a long time.
You get in and out like a duck mating. But one of the things that I think is really important as you talk about, Tom, is you present the issue. Here it is. And what are we learning today? And you give the little back and forths as to the setup. And then from your expertise, you kind of give the background and the philosophy and, you know, what it is that you really need to kind of polish and make things, move forward from those things. So basically, as you said, Tom's given us a little bit of free executive coaching.
And one of the things that I'm aware of, I don't know if you experienced this, Chris, but people are curious what coaching sounds like. They don't know what those conversations are. And so that idea that you, the listener, get to kind of eavesdrop on a conversation, I think interests people. And the truth is, that's how I spend my days, is in those conversations. I've been having those conversations for decades. And so I love those conversations. And it's so much fun to kind of bring them on the podcast and do it as readers' theater, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's really a great approach. So let me ask you this before we get into this. I mean, you are an executive coach. You've been in the executive coaching business, since, however long. I mean, your company's 31 years old, so you've kind of been around since the Reagan administration, I guess. But, with that said, Tom, what do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to coaching and people needing, executive, individual, or group coaching? Well, what's the biggest misconception?
Can I give you two?
This is your platform. You could give me as many as you want.
How about two? So one is, I think, the person who comes to the coaching thinking they really don't need to have much skin in the game, that I'm going to kind of do something and they don't have to get engaged and it'll all be over. And I'm like, what? That's an odd misconception. The other one is, on the other hand, people who want me as a coach or you as a coach to fix people. She's been a problem for us for 10 years. People have been filing complaints about her forever. Will you fix her? It's like, what? No. No, I will not. So that's a misconception too.
Yeah, I like that. I think that one of the things too is when you think about coaching, this really isn't the work that I'm going to do. This is the work that you're going to do, right? I mean, it's my job to guide you. It's my job to share my experiences and my failures and my mistakes and my lessons learned. I got the scars on my back that I hope that you don't have to get. And that's what we're really trying to do from a coaching standpoint. But our job isn't really to fix people. But as we now talk about leadership practice, and as we now talk about the preparation, and one of the things we're going to talk about today, Tom, is the preparation to work with a coach. We do give people different perspectives to where maybe it alters how they're conducting business today, that they're now more of a team player, or they're not as emotional as they've been, or they're easier to motivate and inspire. So we actually, give them the expertise to say, this is how I grow myself.
That's the hope, right? That's the hope. It's been interesting for me, Chris, over the years to understand that one of the most critical pieces in my work with people is to set a really clear goal that everybody agrees on. For me as an executive coach, there's a triangle. There's a line between me and the person I'm coaching, but then there's this third point on the triangle of the organization that's paying for it, and they've got some window into the coaching and they've got some involvement. Everybody has to agree on what the goals are. And if the person I'm coaching doesn't agree, like, well, I don't want to be more extroverted, I don't want to talk up more in meetings, I don't want to whatever, well, then we've got a problem, right? If we don't have clear goals. So, but what you're talking about, that idea of like, yeah, they've got to want to do the work, right? They've got to be engaged.
And I think that that's a really great point. So you developed a great 4-step process that allows people to prepare for themselves to be coached. And I'm looking at the graphic here. It says to be ready for coaching, look for leaders to display. And you've talked about 4 things that they need to have. And number 1, Tom, is curiosity. Do they have the thought process to say, I want to learn. I want to do different things. What does this mean? And how do I do? And what's the best ways? And so curiosity is important. Give us a little bit about that, and why is that such a big issue, or a big kind of reflective momentum for developing the coaching process or the coaching relationship?
So every now and then, I'm on a very, 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 very first call of someone I'm going to coach, right? So I've gone through getting hired or whatever it is, and I'm talking to this person. They don't know me. I don't know them. I'm about to coach them, whatever the hell that means, right? We are strangers, and they have no questions for me. I find that odd. Don't you? Like, this thing is about to happen to you. Like, I'm going to come into your life and do something to you. Don't you want to know anything about it? When somebody's not curious at all, and I don't mean, by the way, I'm not taking this personally like they're not curious about me. I mean, if they're not asking me questions, then they're not asking anybody questions. Do you know what I mean? Then that's not how they lead in their lives. That's not how they work, which means they're probably not doing a lot of listening either, right? I mean, so to me, when I meet someone who just kind of has no curiosity, it's a concern. And I do want to say, part of the reason this is on the list is I coached a guy down in Texas who had no curiosity. I got to tell you, he was one of those guys. He just had no curiosity, and he was a fantastic leader. So I don't think this is a make or break, like it can't be all or nothing here, but it was interesting for me to watch him. The truth is, he did not need me much. He was doing just fine, but he didn't have curiosity. And no joke, I'm not kidding, and he really didn't want it. We talked about it. He was doing fine without it. So that's the flip side of curiosity. It's not you got to have it or else.
How much of that, Tom, do you think goes into the fact of people not really knowing what a coach is about, right? So I'm now stepping into this relationship where I'm giving money to somebody who's supposed to help me get to the next level. They got to have all the answers. Is that part of the misconception as well? Is that they've got to come in with the curiosity rather than say, give me the blueprint, Tom. I'm paying you now. I mean, so that's got to be part of this problem as well, don't you think?
That is so great. Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm really clear about is like, I'm not like an answer guy. I'm not going to like tell you what to do, right? Because yeah, you're right. There are some people who are like, just tell me, just give me the script, right? And it's like, wait, well, not quite. I mean, and by the way, I don't mind that at a certain point, but that's not where we start. And that's partly about the curiosity piece.
I like
Yeah.
that. And, that's it is. Sometimes sometimes we do give a little guidance, but our
Oh,
job
for
really is
sure.
our job is to facilitate. So number 2 is something that I think is probably one of the most important components to individual success. I think it goes hand in hand with self-awareness, and that is self-reflection. It gives us the opportunity now to think about who we are and who we've become and how we got to where we are. But one of the things that we start to think about in a coaching relationship, it's all about the me and how I am going to progress. And tell us a little bit about self-reflection and why that's important.
Yeah. Well, there really are some people who just don't know much about their inner life. They actually don't know much about their feelings. Every day feels kind of the same to them. They don't have a lot of vocabulary around it. They can't distinguish much. These people are, by the way, often leaders that are highly effective, but they may not be in touch with their inner life, which means that when you say to them, how did that meeting go? They will tell you what was said, but it's like, no, 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 no. What about your boss? How was she? And they go, I don't know. She seemed fine. It's like, you're not gathering data in the world. You're not self-reflective. That's really interesting then, right? Because the coaching changes if people don't have a lot of self-reflection. And the question that I always ask is, can it be taught? Can I teach you to be more self-reflective? That's an interesting conversation that I have with people. What do you find about that?
I think that one of the things that's important here is I think people do have self-reflection. I don't think they know what it's called, but I think what they do is
Ah,
I wonder why that happened, and then rather than be brutally honest with yourself, to take them through the process of the emotion, of the failure, of the reaction, they're just going to brush that aside. But I think what we're doing as coaches now is we're sitting with them to say, you know what, let's not push that aside. Let's bring that to the forefront. And I want to know how you felt. I want to know if you felt humiliated or embarrassed, and why did you feel that way? One of the things that I talk about with my daughter, she's 23 years old, Tom, and she lives with her mom in Texas. Of course, I'm in St. Louis, and she'll call me. She's like, Dad, Mom's making me mad. And I'm like, well, who are you telling? Who are you telling? That's why I live in St. Louis and she lives in Texas. And but I say, why is Mom making you mad? Well, she doesn't understand. I said, no. About this is making you mad? Why do you have to be mad about this? And at 23 years old, she can't see the forest for the trees. And I'm trying to get her into that self-reflective mode to understand the why. Because Tom, you got to agree that once you understand the why, you become more emotionally powerful.
well, you gain in self-awareness, right? I mean, the thing that I talk about that I think is an absolute parallel to this is what do you make of it? What does it mean to you? If that happened, then what? And I think that's the self-reflective tool that I often do with people is like, what meaning are you attaching to something? And if they say it doesn't mean anything, that's a challenge too. Because again, if you take in data, usually as people, we attach meaning to things. I mean, in the old days, here living in Los Angeles, somebody cuts me off on the freeway. I've got a whole story about them before they finish changing lanes. It's like I make meaning out of it. So yeah, that's part of all the self-reflection stuff.
I agree with you 100%. And they talk about emotional intelligence, and if the emotional intelligence is the queen of our communication toolbox, self-awareness and self-reflection has to be right up there with the importance of what we do. But the third component that we have is self-responsibility. And when we think about leadership and we think about being in the positions of responsibility, how important is self-responsibility? One of the things that I find, if I can give you just a little bit of experience, is one of the things that we find when we coach people is we need to get them to understand what their responsibilities are into the current actions they're living. And a lot of times people don't take those responsibilities. It's easier to blame somebody else, Tom. It's easier to say your failure was because of, when we don't take responsibility, it's easier for us to pass the blame. But what do you find in your experience?
I'm aware that I have a story. Talk about making meaning. I make meaning out of your history in the armed forces, the special forces, being a medical technician and all that, right? My imagination is that you have to be super personally responsible to succeed in those organizations. You just have to. You don't necessarily, by the way, have to be self-reflective. The other one. But I think that's the idea that you can trust my word. If I say I'm going to be there at 6 a.m. in the morning, I will be there at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? If I say that I'm going to send you that email with an attachment, I'm going to send that email with an attachment, right? This idea of self-responsibility, I think we cherish it in leaders, that we can trust them, that they will do what they say they are going to do. And like I say, I imagine that's the background you came from.
When we think about it, I mean, it's always about, ensuring that we're doing the best that we can and taking responsibility for our action. I still think that there's a point in our careers where we're trying to pass the buck. We're trying to pass the blame. It's always other things, right? It's always something else until we realize that we have to take responsibility. When you think about curiosity and when you think about self-reflection, now you think about self-responsibility. This is really the trifecta of who you are as an individual, how you've gotten to become who you are as an individual. And I'm not talking about professional, because your professionalism comes from your individuality, and that's where your professionalism drives from. But you're not going to be professional unless you have that core of who you are as a person, right? So curiosity, self-reflection, and self-responsibility. And these are all things that are tight. You can't, so far we've got one more to go, which I think is a really important one. But right now with this trifecta, you can't proceed in your professional and personal career if you don't have these three things as a foundation.
I'm glad you see it that way. That's great. That's great.
So number 4, which is one of my favorites, Tom, I've been saying for years that it's not the goal that develops the individual. It's the journey you take in reaching the goal that develops the individual. Reaching the goal is just the extra gravy, but there are speed bumps and there are hurdles and there are mistakes and there are lessons learned. And sometimes it's easier for us. We get that voice in our head, that negative talk that's not our friend, to say, throw in the towel. But number 4 on your list is resilience. And tell us a little bit about resiliency.
Yeah. In my conversations with people, it's really interesting to observe who is and is not resilient and about what. And I know that that's true in my own life, right? That some things feel like I don't even notice them, and I know that they would derail other people. So resiliency is this idea that I think things are going to happen. Things are going to knock us off balance. Things are going to make our lives challenging. And the question is, how fast do you get back to a kind of healthy neutral? How fast do you get back on balance? That's what resilience is. But I'm always interested. I'll just give you an example. I was talking to a woman last week, coaching conversation. We have a 90-minute call. Other than about the first 10 minutes, we spent the entire rest of the time talking about one exchange she had with one of her direct reports. It was really important to her. Now, I don't want to diminish it and say it was not important. What was interesting to me was she really needed 80 minutes of time to just process it. And around that one issue, I did not experience her as terribly resilient. Now, I've got to say, on other parts of her life, she's enormously resilient. So I'm not trying to make this characterological, but I think we can think about it kind of incident by incident. How fast was that for me as a recovery? How fast was that for me as a recovery? Have a little self-reflection about your resilience.
So I think the question that I had for you is when we think about resiliency, it's easier for us when those things happen to just give up. We hear all that negative self-talk in our head, right? We hear the I'm not going to be successful. What makes you think you could be successful? You've failed 100 times before. You're not going to be. I mean, so in your advice or in your expertise, when people are challenged with the speed bumps and the hurdles and the the things that are getting in their way, how do you teach them to be resilient? How do you teach them to get over the hump? How do you teach them to continue down the path, and then probably use the self-reflection to keep them going in the positive direction?
I've had a couple of people in my life that I have coached over a period of like a decade, and we don't talk all the time, but I have gotten to see them in their careers evolve. And it has been such a gift for me, Chris, because one woman in particular that I think of, she and I used to go so slowly in her coaching because every conversation, she really needed to examine it and look at it. And she wasn't terribly resilient all the time. Things really slowed her down. Now, almost a decade later, and she's older, but she's learned a series of questions that I ask her pretty much every time we talk, like, what about this? Or what meaning do you make of it? Or whatever the questions are. She's taught herself a way to think over all that time. And she is so much more resilient now. It's been interesting to watch her evolution. And I feel really privileged to be able to have contributed some of it, which is partly what questions are you asking yourself? And what questions are going to be helpful to get you back on track?
But just as a last point, and jump in on this for me, this is normal, right? This is going to happen, and we've got to be able to be prepared for it.
Which is why we think about resiliency as so important. And some things that knock me off track on Monday might not knock me off track on Thursday, but hey, when it happens on Monday, yeah, it's really happening. How are you going to get back up? Come on. And listen, in this period of COVID and everybody under stress and everybody's life disrupted so badly, I think we're learning a lot about ourselves in resiliency. And I find it changes day by day, if not hour by hour. It is completely normal.
I think that those are really great things. And these 4 things, they're simple, right? I mean, but they're so powerful. So kudos to you for the development of that. And if it's okay with you, let's find a way that we could share this with the listener, this infographic. And
I would love to share it with your listeners. Oh my gosh, absolutely. So I will send you a link and people can just go and download it and help themselves. I hope it's helpful.
That's very awesome. And so let's talk a little bit about you. You're a speaker, you're a coach, you're a podcast host. If folks want to learn a little bit more about you, maybe they want to hire you as a coach, maybe they want to get you to speak at their events, what's the best way they can reach you?
I run a company called Essential Communications, and our website is essentialcom with 2 M's.com, essentialcom.com. So listen, we're there. We're about to do a big rebuild and make it really podcast friendly. It's been great. So come, there's tons and tons and tons of free stuff on our website. So please come and help yourself, essentialcom.com.
So as soon as that comes up, I know you're going to have a new website. I am going to be a regular there and look forward to all your stuff. But I am a fan of yours, Tom. I love your show. I appreciate you giving time to come on and talk to the listeners. And if there's anything that you can do, is promise me you're going to come back so we can continue these great discussions and share your expertise with the people who are trying to get to their next level.
I am honored.
And for everybody out there, I want you to think about this. And a lot of times we put ourselves in a position where we've got to think about our growth, but we don't really do anything about it. Are you curious enough to grow? Do you have good self-reflection? Are you self-responsible? Do you take responsibility for the things? Try for 1 week just to take responsibility for everything that happens and see how you feel about it. And then finally, get over the hump, get over the speed bump, get over those hurdles and keep yourself in the direction, because it's the journey you take in reaching the goals that help you grow and get to your next level. It's not reaching the goals. That's the extra gravy. That's the whipped cream and nuts on that ice cream sundae. But it's the journey you take that fills that bowl. I want to thank everybody for joining us once again on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I want to thank my guest, Tom Henschel, for being there. And I think I got a new friend here. But for everybody out there, I want to thank you for joining me once again, and I look forward to chatting with everyone again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of ChrisCebollero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.